Are you listening?
This is the Rob Scott Show.
Damn.
I mean, really, like, if we're not trying to change the world, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And welcome back to the Rob Scott Show.
Welcome back. Thanks for listening. It's great to see you. How are you today, Rob?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited about this episode. I know that you have done more research on this, which is interesting because this is maybe my most important topic, right? Like this is the one. And so I'm excited to kind of be, not as prepared for this and just ready to kind of speak into this because this is what we do. Anyway, here's what today is going to be about. We want to talk about ending suffering. And when I say that, I literally mean it, right? I mean the actual prospect of ending suffering for yourself personally. And, me as my big audacious goal for the world and for our business is to end suffering on planet Earth. And I realize how ridiculous that might sound. And I want to legitimately talk to you today about what it means to end suffering in your own life. And if we can all sort of figure this out, we can make a big dent in suffering on planet Earth. So
it does. It sounds like a huge task here, but
it sounds ridiculous. It
sounds ridiculous.
Like.
But what's awesome, and for those of you just tuning in, or maybe if this is your first episode, so Rob's a mindset coach, and a lot of what the business is centered around is being able to shift your mindset in really powerful ways that can make big changes for you. And what's really fun about this topic, and why I'm excited to talk about it, is that something that sounds so big and impossible, you figured out a way to define it and break it down into something that's not so big and impossible, and something that's really tangible and helpful and useful.
Yeah. Was this helpful to you? I mean, this is one you like a lot too, right? Has this made changes in your life?
Yeah. And I think the bad part to understanding how to end suffering is that at some point in your life, you've experienced suffering.
Right.
So I guess that's
actually probably in some point of your day today, you've experienced suffering.
Right.
It's a pretty consistent part of things. And
I want to tell our listeners how you define suffering so we can kind of set that up for this episode. But I don't know if we want to talk about the kind of other kind of things around this first.
Yeah, do a little of that. What are the other kinds of things around this? What do you mean by that?
Okay, so often when we are in suffering, that's when you're feeling stressed. That's when you're feeling overwhelmed. You're depressed. You're anxious. We're talking about those emotions that kind of suck your energy out, that make it hard to be doing powerful things. When you're out of suffering, you have joy, you have clarity, you have mental energy. You have a feeling of freedom. You're not in worry. So that's why I think this is going to be very valuable.
Totally. Yeah. So that's a great way to kind of set this up. And let's make it even bigger than that, right? I think, if you take, there's a Buddhist idea that kind of life is suffering, or, that suffering is kind of what it is to be human and all that. And that ultimately suffering is craving and suffering is desire. And you might say suffering is attachment. And all of these things are incredibly valuable and really, really good. To me, an even more foundational meaning of suffering is quite literally this. And if you're driving, please don't write this down, but this might be something to kind of jot down to come back to just as a main idea. And this might be the main idea of the whole show here. It's that suffering is resisting what is. Okay. And so you have an is-ness, you have a quality about you in any moment. It might be physical sensations. It might be sounds you're hearing. It might be desiring certain things. And we judge those moments as they come in. And because we're creative and because we can imagine things and all that, it's very natural for our human mind to go, I don't like this. I wish it were different. And that's incredibly useful when we can do something about it, right? It's incredibly useful when we go, wow, that's bad. Let's make that better. And then we go ahead and make it better and yay, right? I want to celebrate that. That's super useful. But what normally happens for many of us is we end up having a sensation, a relationship, a way of thinking about the work that we do, as we think about our age, as we think about our physical pains in our body, all the different stuff. And we just are sitting in a place where we're like, I don't like this. This is horrible. And there's nothing to do about it. And so that all of a sudden takes on the sensation of suffering. And so now we're suffering. And people are like, well, yeah, but that's like, sometimes you can't do anything about it or whatever, right? Well, here's what I want to point out. And I think a good example is physical pain, right? I want people to imagine somebody getting punched really hard in the arm. Okay. If you're unenlightened, right, and you get punched in the arm, there's very little difference between pain and suffering, right? The pain, if we can kind of redefine these things, the pain is the literal physical reaction in your body of, nerves freaking out and sending signals to your brain and all that stuff. And we would absolutely say that that pain is necessary. I'm not trying to end pain. In fact, I think pain has an incredibly valuable function on planet Earth. It's how
survival function.
Super important.
Tell you something,
right?
Yeah.
Pain really, really matters. And pain is, if once we judge it, it's not pleasurable quite often, right? We don't normally, unless you're a masochist or something, you don't normally enjoy pain.
Right.
So pain is there. But suffering is the aftermath of that pain quite often, whether it's physical or emotional or mental pain, right? All of a sudden we begin to suffer from it. And so an enlightened person would be able to feel the physical sensations of the punch on the arm, the quote unquote pain, and just be with it. Quite literally, like not judge it, be with it. And it would be a sensation. And you notice actually that chances are that will probably let the pain in the body actually physically heal more quickly, because you won't have the added stress response of, different endorphins and cortisol and all the things that happen from the extra quote unquote suffering of, I hate this. This is horrible. Why did this happen? Oh no. Am I in danger? All these things. And the am I in danger thing is super important. If you're getting punched, please protect yourself and get out of there, obviously, right? And I'm not saying that there's not proper ways to respond to that. But what I am saying is quite often we're not being punched. We do have some level of pain in our life, and yet we're suffering from it, right? So that extra part of, I hate this, this is horrible, right? Imagine two different people. One person is just being with the pain, is what I call it, right? You're actually experiencing it almost like you're curious, and you're feeling that sensation in your arm, and it's just an is-ness, right? It's just a beautiful thing. The other person is suffering from it. They're like, I hate this. This is horrible. I don't want this, etc. That suffering, that level of this is actually what's making you really unhappy to a great degree. And it's the part that you can actually, that is a choice to a great degree. When you become aware of this, you can put that down. So you, Sarah, have a ton of better examples than getting punched in the arm. But
I love that example, because I mean, going back, and I just want to reiterate how we're defining suffering, which is resisting what is, which sounds so simple and digestible, but is so maybe the most powerful concept that we can kind of serve out to our listeners here, is that even in that example of I'm in pain, a suffering mind is saying, I hate this. Like you said, I hate this. Why is this happening to me? Versus this hurts.
Yeah.
That is not resisting what is. Why is this happening to me? That is resisting what is. It's a key distinction, and it's kind of subtle, right? Because these are big words: suffering, pain, enlightenment. But it's really, that's what it is. It's switching that kind of automatic knee-jerk thought that we have of, I don't want to be doing this. You said something right in the beginning about, wishing things were different. I would love to switch lives with any of our listeners who can say, I went a whole day without wishing a single thing was different. Right. And in preparation for this podcast, I was thinking about this. I had a long drive the other day, and I was kind of almost chuckling to myself, because I was thinking about this talk and suffering and really, resisting what is. And then intermittently, I'd have these thoughts of, I really wish that I wasn't in the car right now. Yeah. I really wish my drive wasn't so long. And then, maybe
you would wake up to that suffering, right? You would wake up to, oh, I'm doing it right now.
Yeah,
right?
I'm doing it right now, not intentionally. And you know what? It was making the drive worse. It was making the drive feel longer. It was making me feel kind of stuck. And it was my own,
until you noticed it and put it down, though. I mean, that's the point.
Creation.
Right. You can put it down, right? And then you can giggle about it and you go, oh, isn't that funny that I'm not okay being in the car, but I'm in the car. So why would I
went with the is-ness, right? Yeah. I went with what's happening right now that I'm not going to push against. And it's, hey, I love the song that's on the radio. I love the scenery that's around me. I like that I'm not in traffic. I mean, it was like an instant switch, and the drive did not feel as, and that's just another basic example of how we do this. If you live in extreme climates or just regular climates these days, in the summer, how many of us say, oh my gosh, I'm so hot. I'm so hot. So
Yeah.
hot. I wish it wasn't so hot. I wish it wasn't so whatever. Or in the cold. It's freezing. I wish it wasn't so cold. And like, I mean, that's something I think pretty much every single person, I wish the sun wasn't in my eyes. I wish this is something that we do constantly on every kind of level of who we are, from things like the weather to things like being punched in the arm or
well, imagine
whatever.
diving into a cold pool.
Diving it, yes, exactly.
And imagine that person who dives into the cold pool and just freaks out, like it's just not okay. It's like, this is the worst. I can't even breathe. I gotta get out. Like, and they're panicking. It's like building, and it's worse. And then some other, calm dude just like dives in, and it's equally cold, right? Their subjective experience might be different to it, but like he's cold too, right? It didn't change temperature for him, but his reaction to it is, I'm just going to be with this cold. And if you don't compare, right, here's an important idea. It's you mentioned that different kind of thinking about it, right? One is wishing it's different, and one is like, okay, this hurts, and the reality of that. Both of those are in thought. There's a move here that is, can I actually go into what I unconsciously want to resist, right? The first impulse, for safety reasons, by the way, like this is almost anti-survival, if you will, in some sense, because most of these impulses are built to avoid pain. I mean, pain is this teacher, and the suffering part is what makes us learn our lessons and do all these things and actually create stories about things. And there's a huge evolutionary function to pain for sure.
Right.
And I would suggest even suffering as well. Right.
Right.
But we've let our suffering become so mental and so there that we're really not in bad times, but yet we are telling this story to ourselves of it's just the worst. This person doesn't like me, or I'm not popular on Instagram, or, we're dreading things in our mind that aren't even in reality. And we're suffering about them because we just wish that even our fantasy was like different than what is right here. Like, and then when we actually get some form of the fantasy, the actual reality of it isn't how good as we thought it was. And so we're in this cycle of whatever. So when you notice your suffering, which will be in the emotional realm, I mean, you'll feel like angry or anxious or annoyed or whatever's going on there. And these may be subtle. You may notice it in the thinking realm. You might notice a thought that's like, that is kind of driving this stuff. But it's often more obvious in the emotional realm. You'll literally feel jealous of someone, or you'll feel, anxious about something, or you'll do whatever. There's something there that you can go into the feeling of. So back to the punch in the arm, right? The impulse is to avoid it. Like, this is pain. I don't want to think that. I wish that didn't happen. God, how could I have not had that happen? Or what can I do now? Do I need ice on it, or what do I need, and all that? And some of that's legitimate. If you really need ice, go get ice. I'm not saying don't do that. But in the process of that, there's a way to dive into the feeling, to literally be with it. So the lesson here is almost dive in on that which you want to resist and see if you can experience it differently without judgment, right? Without going, this is good or this is bad or this is whatever. That's what is-ness means. Is-ness is in that middle part where there's no good, there's no bad. And I'm not adding any quality of judgment to it. I'm literally just being with the sensation, right? So when you're anxious, there's a sensation of your anxiety. There's a tingle in your chest. We make that horrible. I don't want to feel this way. I call it anxiety. This is the worst. I need a doctor. I need a pill. I need something. I need some other thing. And can you actually instead just be with that warmth, that heat, that tingle, that, if you were to judge it, that discomfort, whatever that is, and just be with it. And what you'll notice is it will start to dissipate. It'll have a different quality. You'll realize that it's already here. You can actually be with what is. And now all of a sudden you're this different level of human being. You're expressing a different consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In the maybe simplest definition of enlightenment, that's definitely something that's important, is understanding the is-ness, the present, being in touch with the sensual part of life and how it is. And if you think about what you said, I mean, I do want to go back and talk about then what you were saying with the cycle, kind of the mental cycle of feeling, of suffering, and how that repeats itself. On my drive, I didn't think that one time. I didn't think that when I was getting in the car. I thought that 10 or 15 times in the first hour and a half. Not consciously, it just popped up.
And you'll think it more when the brake is being depressed, right? Like all of a sudden, if you're flying and there's no traffic, it's one thing. But all of a sudden, it's like, this is horrible. Like, well, what changed? Your forward momentum isn't what you expected it to be. And it's not going, this is going to take forever. Right?
This is going to take forever. Right. And you talk about this a lot in the mindset coaching work, but the way that we kind of train our brains to think in certain patterns, right? So
Yeah.
maybe, like you said, there's definitely evolutionary advantages to some of these thoughts. We're not saying you're not going to have these thoughts, but it's looking at, are these thoughts cycling around? Are you keeping yourself stuck in this? Is this just what is kind of overtaking you? And then I already forgot the other thing that I was going to say.
It's okay. I mean, these are examples of things happening to us and, all that. But to your point, what you were just saying there is these become ways of being, right? Our story about our past, our story about our job, our story about our partner, our story about ourselves, how talented we are, how our story about money, our story about our own health, right? Like, am I an athlete or not, or whatever. These become little ways that we're telling suffering stories to ourselves, right? This is, I'll never be loved. I'm not attractive. I'm not whatever. And we may not think of those as, oh, I'm not suffering. That's just my truth. That's just what is. But those can be optimized to a huge
optimized. Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I guess I kind of remembered it. It was thinking more about the muscle of judgment, which it is not kind of the focus here, but it's an important thing to keep in mind, because a punch is not bad. Weather is not bad. Like, there are things that happen to you that we, like you said, we associate, we say, oh, that's bad, anxiety, whatever, we kind of label them. That's all happening in our head, in our mind, in the way that our thought works. Yeah. So we're not, when Rob's mission is kind of to end suffering on planet Earth, we're not talking about this kind of euphoric false existence where there's nothing quote unquote bad or physical or circumstances. We're talking about that, finding that euphoria in the way that your thought creation is happening. And that's I don't know, I think that's just a beautiful thing.
It really is. And so let's make that clear. It's not only that those things aren't bad, they're not good either.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
So what's happening outside objectively is there's an is-ness. It's happening there. And then we add the judgment of, like, is that good or bad? And there are things that we would all agree are good. And so, in some useful context, we could say they are good. That's fine. But it still requires us to judge it against other possibilities, and it requires thinking, right? And so there's a quality of not thinking, just experiencing. And this is what, people who meditate for a long period of time, this is what, quote unquote, enlightened people walking around have more skill or mental muscle in, is this ability to just be present, be literally with what is. And as you're being with what is, the path to this is literally just to put down judgment in the moment and be with all the sensations, be with all the sounds, be with all the sights, be with what is. The editor in your brain of how different this is to what you want it to be, that is the degree to which you suffer.
Yes. Right? Oh my God. Yes, exactly. Yes.
So your ability to appreciate what is versus your ability to suffer is the degree to how happy you are, right? So if you think about that, like, here's an is-ness. However far away, distant I expect that to be, and the more attached I am to how different that should be, that's where reality feels incredibly wrong to me, right? Mm-hmm. And if that's only a little, like, if I just kind of wished I had a piece of gum right now, I wouldn't say that's a lot of suffering, but that's the beginning of a kind of suffering. It's like, my mouth is bored, or I don't have enough flavor, or whatever, but that's not a lot of suffering. But if I'm literally burning in fire right now, and reality would be, wow, I wish this wasn't happening. That's a whole lot of suffering. And clearly we would all agree that's legitimate, right? That's there. Nobody's going to argue that you shouldn't suffer if you're being burned alive.
Yes, absolutely.
But there is a picture, one of the 20th century's Time magazines, where a guy's meditating through being, completely engulfed in flame. So there's a possibility of our human experience where we can literally just be with what is, without expressing all of the complaints about it, right? I want you to imagine that when you're complaining about things, quote unquote, suffering, that you're kind of like that annoying 8-year-old who's like yelling in a store because they can't have everything that they want to have, right? Imagine that annoying kid who's just like, but mom, I want that, and no, and this and that and all that, right? Like, when we're complaining about, I don't make enough money, I don't like the car I have, I don't like how I look, I don't have all that. That's kind of like the version of you that's not accepting all that you do have, that's not like with the is-ness of how beautiful the world is. Now, I don't want to discount your problems, right? I realize that we have real problems. I have real problems. There's real things out there that we want to work to get better, that we want to do whatever. But the muscle of appreciation, the muscle of being able to be with what is, will deaden your suffering in its tracks as soon as you start doing it, right? Like in the instant that you do it. In the instant that Sarah realized, oh, my brain is doing that resistance to driving thing, and you put that down, you can actually have a giggle and the suffering goes away. Now, it doesn't mean she's not still driving, right? Like she still has to be in the car.
Exactly.
But to what degree can her brain change her own reality about that? How much can she change her own subjective reality by making a different meaning, by putting down a certain judgment in the moment? And it requires awareness. It requires an ability to be self-aware enough to notice that you're doing it, and then the courage to change it. And as soon as that light turns on, that you see that that's possible for you, you start doing it kind of across your whole life in lots of different ways.
Yeah. I mean, and it makes a big change. And if you said that that suffering lives in a feeling, right? When you're saying, you know, my brain switched and I'm still driving, but I'm not in suffering, right? What you're talking about is a feeling that I had of whatever it is, like boredom or kind of frustration, resistance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That feeling is what you're saying just disappeared. That is quote unquote suffering. And I kind of want to back up a little bit, and because there's, yes, all the ways that we've talked about it, you're suffering, but I kind of want to run through a couple other quick ways where I've kind of seen this. And then I have a couple questions for you too. Yeah. But as far as, so there's the aspect of complaining or, you know, wishing, wanting things that you don't have. There's the aspect of pushing against things external that are happening. You're in the car, the weather, whatever. But I also I thought of a couple other examples. If say you're experiencing aging with your parents aging, and you wish that they weren't. Of course, it's natural. You don't want to see them go through that process. But what you're doing by cycling thoughts of, I wish that they were more lucid, or I wish they had a better memory or better hearing, or I wish they didn't have that walker. What you're doing is you're resisting you're resisting the process of aging and how that affects the mind and the body. Another example would be,
let me pause there. Can I speak into that for a second? Because that's a really, really great one.
Yeah.
So people hear that. I hear that. And I go, well, I don't want my parents to age and die. And that sounds horrible. And that's, of course, going to be the worst. But what I want to point out is there's a way to experience that. Imagine you're the person that is totally suffering from that. You're hating every moment of it. You might even build resentment against your parent, right? Like you start to get like annoyed by them, right? Their dysfunction, they're requiring more of your time and energy. Like it could literally become horrible. The expense of it, all that stuff, it's the worst. And we would all agree that sucks. I don't want it. I don't want to get punched in the arm either. Like I don't want any of these things to happen, right? But as they're happening, is there a version of you that could be accepting of it? Light of it, love the beauty of your parent, whatever level of cognition they have, whatever level of mobility they have. Yes, it has a cost financially, but you're willing to give that in. Like, is there a whole different version of you that can make fun of it, like have joy with it, honor the fact that this person may be passing soon, and then you spend the last years of life with your parent in this really connected, fun, jovial, loving, maybe spiritually connected, whatever you want to think of, right? There's that version of the rest of your parents' life, right? Or the version where you're just resisting all of it, hating all of it, and suffering deeply from all of it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You can do either of those. And my point in this talk is that that's up to you way more than we think it is, right? It's way more in our control.
It's almost 100. I mean, would you say it's 100% up to you? I know we don't like to speak on
difficult, right? It becomes difficult. If you light me on fire, it's going to be really difficult to not suffer from that, right? So you're going to watch me like walk back the ending of suffering thing, right? There's what I want people to get though is that when this is available to you, you can end suffering whenever you want. What if that were the first step, right? What if you could decide to be with whatever it is? Like I'm talking extreme back pain. I'm talking, I'm a cancer survivor. I've, had all kinds of really bad things happen to me personally. And I've experienced them using these tools that I'm talking about, and it changes the game. I mean, people around me can see that it's not the same experience of some of these things happening because you don't have to judge them in the same way, and you don't have to complain about them in the same way to yourself or to others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
I love that. No, that's great. And I'll fly through these quickly. I know you guys are kind of getting this, but I want to highlight how suffering shows up in so many ways for every single person. So another example would be if you have a spouse who doesn't like their job. Comes home every day after work and says, hey, I hate my job, my boss, I'm stressed, and blah, blah, blah. And you wanting to be a supportive spouse is, I wish they had a different job. I wish they're like, you're then putting your thought process, you're cycling thoughts for them. You're resisting what is going on. Another thing is, if your company, you work in the corporate world, your company, you get those memos, those emails, company-wide meetings, a new policy's up, you hate the policy.
Yeah.
We've been doing it this way forever. This is the system. I don't want to do it differently. Again, watch your thoughts there, like check yourself and see. And then, the obvious, what we were talking about, the self, I wish I had more money. I wish I was on vacation. I wish whatever. And I was thinking about the word, I wish I was, I wish I wasn't, right? That is keeping us, that is resisting what the is-ness of the moment is. And if you think about wishing, or that word, and how that's almost like, if you think about fairy tales or Cinderella or the genie, it's this thing that we're taught is magical and is kind of fairy tale for us to wish and have these wishes. And the lottery, I don't know if you guys are following, but at least at the time we're recording this, a big lottery win just happened the other day.
Oh, did it? I don't even know. Yeah.
$1.6 billion was won.
1.6 billion.
Yeah,
wow.
It was a big lottery win. And many conversations. I wish that what would I do if I had that money? I wish I would. And that's fun. I'm saying don't have those thoughts, but the mindset cycle of having those thoughts of wishing for more.
Well, it's fun until it isn't, right? So let's think about that. It's not, thoughts aren't bad all by themselves until they are, right? Until you're wishing so hard that it's making you kind of hate your own life or hate your own situation or just really suffer, right? And so being mindful of, is my thinking driving my suffering, right? Rather than suffering is not optional, right? Moving our idea to, oh, wow, I'm creating my suffering by the meaning that I'm making, right? That's what's happening right now. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't change things, right? This is not just sit on a rock and accept all the is-ness of everything all the time.
Right.
Is-ness is an option, right? The good and bad that you place on things, if those are serving you, if you can say, hey, that's bad, I want to change it, go change it. Right? Go do that. That's great. But if you can't change it and you're suffering because of it, then drop the good and bad and just be with the is-ness of it and spiritually accept it, right? If that makes sense. To just and I don't want to get all spiritual because that's such a charged word and people think that, but like this is it's an act of maturity to be able to deal with what is, right? It's again with that really young kind of complaining child.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a whole lot of adults that are actually children still walking around, never grew up.
Unfortunately.
Right? They're just ranting and raving and hating life and doing all this stuff. And it's like, hey, like, can you just be with what is? Like, here's where you are. What does it look like to accept that? And as you're not accepting it, good if you're changing it, go ahead and change it or make the effort to change it. That's fantastic. But that of which you can't change, if you don't accept it, that's madness, right? It's madness. If you can't change it and you don't accept it, then you're just sitting there suffering and spinning and suffering and spinning. And so,
yeah, and you've almost answered the two how questions that I had just in what you just said. I was going to ask you kind of how do we find the balance of having useful thoughts and having suffering thoughts, and like you said, is it serving you? Is it something that's useful to you?
Yeah.
If it is, put the judgment. If it's not, if you're feeling stressed, worried, overwhelmed, in fatigue, energy,
your judgment muscle is going to be on all the time. Like we can always look at something and go, I like that or I don't like that. Like our preferences, that desire muscle. I think that's what Buddhism is trying to say, right? That life is desire. Life is this idea of creating more and better and all that stuff. Like that's on autopilot. So the practice here is once you notice that that's leading you to suffering, right? To sadness, to overwhelm, to whatever, how can you come back and really maybe build up a gratitude muscle or notice what is, or be really grateful? Like you can have physical pain in your body. That's the most obvious one to me. I keep coming back to it, but like you can have physical pain in your body, which I deal with quite a bit. I have like back issues and my arms are sore. Like I have elbow things going on. There's all these things, right? I can actually get into, let's say in a meditation, and you're really uncomfortable in the meditation in the moment, you can get into a different way of being with that where you're like, you know what, like that pain lets me know that I'm alive, right? That pain is almost like the background of the universe letting me know that I'm still here, right? In a sense. And I think when you were talking about the aging parent, there's a underlying fear for all of us of like our own death.
Oh, resisting our own aging. Yeah.
Resisting our own aging, right? Resisting, which, before we even consider death, it's like, I don't want to be less attractive. I don't want to be not as sharp mentally. I don't want to be I don't want to become less mobile. All those things are realistic, right? But if you just put all those down, stop that comparison and just be what you are, make your best effort to remain healthy, like love the fact that winning is surviving longer, right? People who make fun of like, oh, you're 60 now or whatever's going on. It's like, yeah, I'm winning. Like I made it all the way to 60. I hope I'm soon 70 and then 80 and then, like whatever, as long as I can kind of, keep managing my mind about all these things and stay.
Yeah. Well, to me,
as
and I guess that's like my own personal, but I just think that's so silly is to resist, oh, I'm older. It's like, of course, it doesn't matter. It's nothing. It's time. Like but and then my other question was, I guess, and again, I think you've kind of already answered it, was just how, and I was thinking more to the driving example that I was giving, where I said it happened 10 or 15 times before I even realized it was happening, is what are some tips or tricks of how we can be aware when we're doing this, when we're in that cycle, which I feel like kind of maybe when we're in that cycle, it's actually unconscious to us. Yeah. Unless we're trying to torture ourselves by repeatedly thinking.
So I think this is the growth, right? This is the growth that's available to all of us is, number one, we have to become aware of this. If we don't even know what's happening, we're just going to remain unconscious and we're going to be kind of puppets to, the universe. So what we're trying to do here is grow our consciousness. We're trying to grow our awareness in certain ways and understand different things. If somebody didn't know what I was talking about or what we're talking about before this podcast, now they know. Now we've rung the bell. If you, don't completely disagree with us, right? You're realizing that to at least some degree, suffering is optional. And that it's coming from you kind of hating what is, right? So if you can stop resisting what is, there's a move here and a practice that just because you know this doesn't mean you're going to be amazing at it right now.
Right, exactly.
There's an opportunity for you to begin to practice, right? Can I do this? And with virtually every client that we work on this with, there is a moment where they're like you in the car, where there's this bit of an epiphany. And I'm not saying that's your epiphany, but like, let's just, right? There's a first time where you see yourself doing this, where you go, oh, wait a second, that's what he was talking about. Because this can make total sense. But yet when you're in your own subjective experience, it's going to be really maybe hard to notice because our suffering feels automatic. It feels right. It's like, I don't like it.
It does feel automatic to us.
And so I will be with clients who will have this epiphany. They'll wake up to it. They'll be able to do it for a while and then they'll forget, right? Like not long after they'll be like suffering again. And then I'm in the conversation with them going, hey, you're doing it again. There you are. Look at how you're attached to that thing. Right, and they go, oh my God, you're right. Like, what am I doing? And so if this is new for you, you're at the beginning of a process that's going to get better and better and better as you try to get better and better and better at this. And so the work here now is the next time that you're literally annoyed with anything, can you move your mind to be with it without judging it and see if you can, by that measure, not lessen the pain of it or the reality of it in any way, but lessen the suffering that you're having from it. And if you can do that, you will see that what I'm saying is, has some backing to it, has some usefulness.
Yeah.
And if it has some usefulness, you will see that is the beginning of the road to ending suffering in your own life, right? Because as you get better and better and better at that, as that happens quicker and quicker and quicker and more automatically for you, you can live a much more connected, present, happy, fulfilled life that is durable, that can deal with difficult things, have that come up, and you don't have to suffer from it. You deal with it, you address it, right? And in a lot of ways, they say the enlightened person, before enlightenment, you chop wood and you carry water. And after enlightenment, you chop wood and you carry water. I mean, it's the exact same thing, but your relationship to it, you're not suffering from chopping the wood.
Sure.
You're just living.
Yeah. It's definitely an attention focus. And I wonder how much for those unconscious times, gratitude practices help, because being able to realize that your attention is on what is and not what isn't, or in a resistance to what is, then I think maybe gratitude could be an extra kind of stepping stool to help you with that.
I love
that's
that.
My go-to. That's what I did car. I was
So
like, let's find all the things I'm grateful for.
Yeah, let's do this. Actually, that's a simpler way for a newbie to get at this, right? So when I'm like, hey, be with what is, people are like, what do you talk? What does that mean? I don't even know what you mean, right? And all I mean by that, just to clarify, is, the pain in your arm, like, investigate it, be curious, literally feel it, like, oh, it's warm, oh, it's tingly, oh, it's whatever, and literally be with it, rather than trying to get away from it when you can't, right? It's happening and you can't get away from it because it's reality and you're hating reality. So that's the beginning of suffering. To your point, instead of resisting it, you can, in the moment, like, let's say I hate that I'm driving, I hate that I'm in this car. A really great move to stop that process is to instead go, what's good in my life right now? What's amazing? Because, by the way, guys, things can always get worse. Like, I don't care how bad it is. You can always
Words of encouragement.
Yeah, you can always add a hot poker in the eye, right? Like, it can always get worse, right? You're having the worst day ever. You could always then be mugged, right? Like, and so I'm not trying to bum you out with that, but the reality is like, however bad it is right now for you, there's a way to go, hey, I'm still breathing, or, hey, this person was kind to me yesterday, or, hey, the sun came up, or, hey, I have food. Right? There's people that don't have food. For me, I have 2 legs. Like, I might have back pain and I'm dealing with some stuff, but, like, I'm still ambulatory. I can walk, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can get around.
It makes me think of, for one of our group programs that we run, the Identity Shifting Mastermind, at the beginning of the group, Rob invites people to share their gratitudes, and sometimes people are just kind of like, or their wins. So yes, he invites people.
Like, what's happened good this week?
Aren't really. Sometimes they don't have anything, and he's
in
like,
our culture,
you woke up today.
People who can afford a really high end program, and they're showing up to really optimize themselves. And I go, what are your wins? And their default is often, I don't have any. Nothing's going on good for me at all. And, like, you'll watch me get fired up about that, because that's absurd. That's a really low level mind if you're not capable of connecting to all the beautiful things that are going on for you. Now, I do realize, I want to be empathetic. I do realize that when you're really suffering and you're really caught in this, it can be very, very difficult. And I don't want to be insensitive. People's minds all work differently, right? We all have chemical imbalances in different ways, right? And some of us just don't fire as much dopamine, or just, less serotonin. And so, there's, our diets could be poor to where we're literally unhappy because, chemically it's very difficult to get there. So there's all kinds of reasons why this is, maybe more difficult than the quick treatment we're doing here. But I think the shortcut that I want to give people here, that if you didn't know it before, it should be incredibly valuable to you, is that suffering does not equal pain. They're not the same thing.
Right.
And the suffering portion of that is something that, with moving your attention, changing the quality of your attention, can immediately, no kidding, immediately end your suffering in that moment. And as you get better at it, it will be a choice that your brain makes more and more on its own, more unconsciously and automatically, so that you can just become a more mature, capable, happy human being that doesn't suffer as much. Tough.
And I'd like to add to that list is that suffering is a feeling, right? You said suffering is a feeling. So that's one way to notice that you're in suffering, is to be in touch with your feelings, and also that you are completely in control of how much you're suffering. And that's directly related to how much you're resisting. So, I think those things are so useful to have in your personal development toolbox, for sure. And it leads, to more joy and bliss and less anxiety and overwhelm.
Yeah. So listen, I want to actually share with people, I think this is a good place, and we mentioned this on a lot of them, but if you know, after hearing a talk like this, if you know that you're suffering and this sounds difficult to you and you don't have a path, from here that's obvious, I want to help you. I want to work with you. We're putting new free tools together all the time. We have a really exciting one coming up called the Fundamental Shift that we're going to have as just a free giveaway for people. We're going to get that together as soon as we can, but we've got plans to create that soon.
And we'll add that link into the show notes once we have it too. Yeah,
maybe we'll go back and do that to all the old show notes and stuff. But and all I'm saying is that there is a path to go further here. And so whether that's oftentimes it's getting help outside ourselves, right? It's hiring a coach. It's working with somebody like me. It's finding therapy if that's what you want to do. It's making sure that you're getting support from parents or friends or somebody, right? So if you are suffering, I don't want to belittle your suffering, because here's what I do know. For you subjectively, it's incredibly real. And for you subjectively, hearing somebody like me say that that's fully an option and you can totally change it and all that, this may not be enough. I hope that we've given you good tips to do it and that you don't need to work with me. But if you don't know how to do it and you want more help, that's what we do, right? So the Recode Your Mind program is an amazing program to optimize mindset, find where you are set up in your unconscious and in your conscious mind with patterns that are deeply not serving you, that lead to dysfunction and suffering and kind of
cycle of suffering and a suffering mind.
Yeah, and so many of these things come from patterns that are rooted in unconscious habits that happen from what you've been through in your life and how you were treated. And it's the example that I often use. I've dealt with women who have body image issues, right? And they can literally be sourced back to one comment from one person in middle school saying, something like, you look fat in that. And that can be so horrifying and embarrassing in that moment that, people get patterned with everything from eating disorders to, self-worth issues to everything. And so those things can get repatterned and rewritten to where you can deeply heal from them, deeply optimize your mindset and change your entire life. And so if that's interesting and you want to do that, certainly keep listening to these episodes, consume the free content that we have over at robscott.com. And if you want to go further and invest in yourself and do a really systematic program to optimize how you feel about money, health, relationships, yourself, all of that stuff, recodeyourmind.com would be an amazing next step.
Yeah. And I kind of joked in the beginning that to understand what we're saying in this episode, that means that you were probably suffering. But the reality, which of course we don't wish upon anyone ever. Yeah. And Rob's mission is to end it, but the reality is all of us suffer in some way or another. So we deeply empathize with that. And we're also happy to help in any way with resources of our own.
The other thing, and I don't mean to keep pitching, but if you have someone in your life, there's a sincere thing here. If you know someone's suffering, your partner, your friend, your parent, your child, and you think this might be valuable to them, please do share it. This is something that we want to get out to more people. And, anyone who's suffering, to me it's like I'm watching people suffer in the world. And it's literally like watching somebody walk into a door over and over and over again and really hurt themselves. And I just want to grab them and go, hey, please, stop. You don't have to do that to yourself. So my sense of empathy for others, because I've been through quite a bit of suffering in my own life.
You've been through a lot. Yeah.
It's really difficult for me to know that we're doing this. And so when you don't know these tools, we tend to suffer much more. And there are real shortcuts to help people. So this is an earnest request that if you know people who are having a tough time, take a moment, find the link to this wherever you found it and get it over to people that are hurting so that they can stop suffering too. So
absolutely. And if you don't know anyone that's suffering, awesome. Thanks for listening. We're really happy for you.
We're happy you're here. Then this is working. Yes. This is working. Awesome. Cool. So do you have anything else to add?
No, that was great. That was it.
Killer. All right. This is awesome. Thank you all for listening so much. Thanks, Sarah. I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.